Hi, my name's Warwick Pudney and I work for Better Blokes. This is the second podcast on anger, so I want to talk this time about the anger scale. The anger scale is about the most useful tool that I've used over the years to assist people to become more conscious of their anger. The idea of this is to get people to recognize they're beginning to feel angry or their anger's at a low level, so that they can manage it before it goes through the roof. Because when it's gone through the roof, you're liable to hurt people. So here we go with the anger scale. It's about knowing your anger and where it comes from. So the anger scale we normally would indicate from 0 through here to 10. And the arrows at the top indicate it's gone loose, it's gone wild. You've lost it when you've hit 10. The rest of the time, it's really good to get an awareness of where you're at on this up and down. An interesting one that a guy told me he did in order to increase his awareness of his anger levels and connect them to his thoughts, because he worked by himself as a roofer on roofs. He set his watch to every 20 minutes ring, and at the moment it went off, he checked his thoughts and he checked his levels of anger. And through that, he kept a record during the day of his anger levels going up and down, but more importantly, what he was thinking about at that exact moment. That's really good training. So it's good if we know this stuff and we know when it's taking place. So notice small tensions or anger as you go and let them go. Tell you more about that in a moment. First of all, on a personalized anger scales, just going back over that, this gives you an early warning or a consciousness of your anger and allows an early release of smaller angers as you go so they don't stack up and burst. So large angers, 7 to 10, are easy to notice. So if I talk to most people about when you were last felt angry or when you remember being angry, they'll usually go to a big anger, somewhere between 7 to 10 on the scale, and tell you about that. That's great. They can easily identify that as anger. However, what's much more difficult and what we're interested in people becoming conscious of is the angers between 0 and 7. That's where we can manage our mood and our presentation much easier. So small angers are harder to notice, and we need to get good at noticing them and letting them go as you go. Here's the anger scale again. Here at the moment, I'm talking about single incidents. So it's on a 7 here on the anger scale. And why that is particularly significant is that most people identify that around about 7, if they reach to a 7 or about a 7, it is best if they take time out. So that means you stop the conversation that you're having or whatever the stimulus for it is, maybe what you're viewing, and you just leave the room. You divert your attention to somewhere else. Now this can be difficult if you're in the middle of an intense domestic conversation. However, if this is explained beforehand, that this is for everybody's good and that this is going to get a result in the end and people are all going to be safe. And whether or not the other person agrees to that, finally, it's your responsibility to manage your anger. And if you have had a problem in the past, with verbal abuse particularly, or demonstrating physically anger expression that scares people, then you need to take responsibility and remove yourself or stop yourself in some way. Telling the other person what you're doing is important. Even more important than that is telling them that you will come back when you've had a chance to think further about it. That's the important bit, because just walking out is cop out really. Coming back is what fixes it. The first type of anger that I want us to have a look at here is not just the single issue anger, which I demonstrated on the other graph, where you feel angry due to one incident and you go to a particular level, say a 5, and then you deal with it. This is not about one incident, this is about multiple incidents that are not expressed and not satisfied as you go along. Here, have a look at this one. You're lying in bed in the morning and you're woken up by the alarm. It goes off and you look at your clock and instantly you realize you're an hour late. You're an hour late because somebody has fiddled with your alarm. And that puts you an hour late on going to work and all the other things that you do in the morning. So before you're even out of bed, you're up to a 1 or a 2 out of the stress and concern of that. And then you hop in your car and you head off to the bank to get some petrol, and you find that your bank card is empty, or there's something wrong with it, it's not functioning, you can't pay for the petrol that you've put in. So we've got a difficulty here that's got its own stress, and you need to resolve that in some way or other. There's also the issue of will you get to work at all, let alone on time. So this is worth feeling angry about if in fact it's somebody else's problem, as in if you share the bank card with somebody else, they've been spending and not telling you, but one of your kids has overused it. So here we are, we're still trying to get to work on time and we're up to a 4. This is because these matters are not resolved. You haven't spoken to the people who created them. But you notice also that you missed out on your breakfast. So by this time, hunger's kicking in a bit. And as well, you may have a coffee may be important to you in the morning. So we've got almost like addiction issues here. Your body is not receiving what it needs in the morning to kickstart and get going. So we can add in on another 1.5 on this. So with the alarm not going off, the bank card being empty, and you're not getting your breakfast, you're now carrying a 5.5. Then after you parked your car at the park and ride, you get on a train or a bus, but you find that that is late too. Your problem actually is getting more, not better, despite your efforts to make it so. So by the time you actually get to work, it's up around about a 7, and like you're never late for work. And as you're going in, the boss usually is in his or her office. But there you go, you're walking out of the lift towards you, and the boss looks, most unreasonably, looks at his or her watch and just notices that you are late. That's not fair, because you're not normally late. You're more likely to give more time to your job rather than less. That's annoying. So you're carrying that in there as well. And when you sit down at your desk, the first thing you do is you need that coffee still, so you grab the coffee, you sit down, and because of the stress you're carrying, you spill it on your clothes. So you haven't even started your work properly, and you're on a 9, and this is not emptied out, it's not released, it's all sitting there as a stacked anger, and the slightest little thing could set off not just one small problem, but a problem that's ranking 9 at the moment. And there you go, the phone goes, and it's that customer with that sort of whiny voice complaining about small things that seem rather insignificant compared to your problems in that morning, and you just slam the phone down. Make that voice go away. So what's happened is that customer that you normally would handle very well, patiently, quietly, redirect them or something, has had quite a rude and abrupt intervention from you. Maybe you've lost your customer. But the thing is, they knew that their little whingy whiny thing was only worth a 1 or a 2, and that's usually what they get away with. But you gave them a full 9 blast of all the things that had stacked up for the day. And so many of us carry stuff around continually, maybe even just 1 or 2 here, which we dispose of as we go, as in letting go of the alarm issue as you take some deep breaths. That's a good way of letting stuff go. The bank card empty, maybe texting your son or whatever who might have used that, just to let them know it's about expressing. You can sort out a better way of dealing with the problem later on, but it does need expressing. Hunger, well, you had a go at that by getting a coffee as soon as you got in the door. That may be a little bit, but just even saying I feel hungry actually identifies that something is happening that's real. Bus being late, well, I'm not sure what you would do there with that one. Maybe you call the company while you're waiting at the bus stop, just to get that sense you're doing something in that time which has become spare due to lateness. As for spilling coffee on your clothes, well, you've already spilled your anger on the client, but you still need to maybe go to the kitchen and put some water on it so that we can reduce the stuff down here. And maybe it's sitting down with somebody who listens to you and just spending 5 minutes to say, whoa, I've had such a morning. Somebody listening really reduces anger. Breathing reduces anger. Doing counting exercises, sitting in your car, turning on some good music and maybe slapping the steering wheel a couple of times. You can talk quite loudly in the car with people without people hearing you, so maybe that works for you. But this stuff does need expression and putting right. Let's have a look now at a third type of anger, which I think is particularly relevant to things that have happened quite some time ago. And in doing that, this is the point at which we can insert our knowledge around sexual abuse, because people who have been sexually abused often don't talk about it to anybody because of the difficulty of talking about it. And when they do, it's often a long time after the incident. So here we've got the same anger scale, but we're talking here about the deep anger that may be forgotten, which didn't happen that morning or yesterday morning. So here we're up to a 3. When we wake up, we're up to a 3 already with this anger that we carry around about this stuff. Just chuck in a bit of racism as well, whether that's to do with indigeneity of people or coming from different backgrounds where people don't understand you and the concepts by which you live. And that can make your job difficult, and you may experience that racism with small triggers when anywhere, particularly if you don't know language well, and particularly if you have significant difference in customs. So it may be a continual thing in your workplace. A lot of people who've had problems around sexual abuse and disrupted childhood have disrupted education. So they don't come out with a fair and equal go at being educated. They come out with disrupted and affected education by abuse that's taking place at home. So this is less visible immediately in terms of feelings, but in terms of what you have achieved, which you bring into the world of work and family. A disrupted education could be another burden which you have added to the struggles of life. Hey, you come out and find your car's damaged, like you don't know who. We just add that on. This may be something that's been bothering you all week because you've still got to get the thing fixed and you don't have the money to do it. So that's just something else that's carried around that's more recent. But if we add this on top of sexual abuse, racism, disrupted education, and we add a more triggering incident of being accused by a friend of being dishonest, for instance. Maybe this has happened before. Maybe this comes out of people simply not understanding your culture, whatever. But this is stuff that you can easily carry around. Well, with a simple one like that, you go kaboom, and the whole of this goes off. Here's an example of the way sexual abuse can hang around. I recall running an adolescent anger management program, and we had a young guy of around the age of just 15, was in the group because he'd broken into a few small shops, dairies, and taken cigarettes and similar things. So this is really a bit of a sign that there's something else going on here, but connecting up stolen cigarettes with sexual abuse is not something we do immediately. Now, it happened that this was a weekly group, and for a couple of weeks he didn't turn up. And we understood that might be because there were school holidays on. So when he did turn up, he was quite moody, and there was something irritating him, upsetting him at the time, to the point where my colleague took him out of the group that we were working in and talked to him individually. And what came out, which he later shared with the group, is during the 2 weeks of his holiday, he'd gone to stay with his dad, and his dad lived and worked on a farm. And on that farm, he had gone into the next door neighbour farmer's barn, and he'd set it alight and burnt it down. And he said that with a degree of satisfaction, because he says in that barn, a number of years ago, he was sexually assaulted and abused by that farmer. So there was an attempt there to extinguish that incident, that harm that took place, by burning the whole thing down. And he'd been carrying that, and I would say it had a major effect on his attitude to other people's property and breaking the law. And we know that this is true. This does have a major effect. So what we've got here are issues that we could call deep anger. This is usually unconscious. It usually needs to be unpicked by people who are good at unpicking that old stuff that people can't even talk about, and bringing it out and shaking it about and sorting out just what happened and who was responsible, and allowing a grief to take place as well. So if this is you, if we've got some of these issues hanging around, particularly, shall we say, sexual abuse, racism, and disrupted education, have a think about this. Go to somebody and have a talk about this, whether it's in a group or whether it's in a situation of a counsellor, therapist, or support person. This does need to be brought out of the cupboard, otherwise it just sits there like a time bomb. So, for sexual abuse victims, some of the things that are often triggers for things happening or for the bomb to go off is the need to have a strong sense of autonomy in life generally. And this fairly obviously is connected to a point or time in your life when you did not have that autonomy. In fact, you had a lot of power over you, and an abusive situation, things happen to you that shouldn't have. So this may often result in reactions to being told what to do by other people, by partners, parents, your boss. It may be that anger is evidenced not just in these situations where there may be a loss of autonomy, but say the completion of or during consenting sexual acts. So we're talking about having a normal sex life, and that sense of anger or lack of control or autonomy coming in and upsetting what's taking place there. And it could also be triggered by things like unsolicited, non-sexual touch. Another person may touch you out of care, concern, and friendship, but it can trigger off abuse that's been sitting in the background that was not friendly or consensual. These are just a few things just to connect it up here with the deep anger scale. You are welcome to come to Better Blokes and talk further and deeper about this. Thanks very much.